This story is titled, Kicked Out of Family Gathering When I Arrived at My Parents' House. I simply said okay, but warned them they won't get the big gift already processing at the bank. Now they're begging for forgiveness. Hey Reddit, I've been lurking on Reddit for years, never thinking I'd have a story dramatic enough to share. But sometimes you reach a breaking point where you just need to get everything out, you know? Some background before I dive into this absolute dumpster fire of family dysfunction. My name is Blake. I'm 27 years old, and I'm the younger of two kids. I work as a network administrator for a healthcare tech company, making decent money. Nothing crazy, but I've got my life together. My sister, who I'll call Victoria, is 34 and has always been what you might call the artistic one. More importantly, she's been my parents' golden child since the beginning of time, and I mean that literally. Our dad worked in management at a steel plant for 25 years until he got laid off 3 years ago. It hit our family hard, especially since Mom had always done part-time admin work so she could be available for Victoria when we were growing up. Looking back, the dynamic was pretty clear from early on. I was always the easy kid who didn't need much attention, while Victoria was the one who required constant support and validation. I was the type of kid who got good grades without being asked, never got into trouble, and generally kept to myself. I earned a full ride to computer science school, graduated with honors, and landed a solid job right out of college. Victoria, on the other hand, was the eternal drama queen. And I don't mean that in a completely negative way, because when she succeeded at something, which was rare, it was like she'd cured cancer. The whole family would celebrate and make a huge deal out of her achievements. But when Victoria failed at something, which was honestly her natural state, it was never her fault. There was always some external factor to blame. A teacher had it out for her, Mercury was in retrograde, or whatever excuse worked for that particular day. The family had developed this pattern where when Victoria needed money, which was constantly, everyone would rally around her like she was some kind of GoFundMe charity case. But when I needed anything, well, I was so capable and independent that I could obviously handle it myself. I used to think that being the reliable, low-maintenance son would eventually earn me some recognition and respect. I figured that if I stayed out of trouble, did everything right, and kept my head down, they'd eventually see me for who I really was and appreciate what I brought to the family. But what actually happened was that they just got used to me not needing anything. And somehow my self-sufficiency made me seem less important. Like being low maintenance somehow made me less of a son. That's how it had always been in our family. Victoria was the special snowflake who needed constant protection and support, while I was the afterthought who was expected to just deal with whatever life threw at me. I thought this dynamic was just an annoying quirk of our family structure, but I had no idea how much worse it was about to get. 3 years ago, everything changed when Dad lost his job. The company he'd devoted 25 years of his life to decided to downsize, and they tossed him aside like yesterday's trash. That hit him harder than anyone in our family expected it would. He fell into this deep depression and couldn't seem to find equivalent work anywhere. Mom's part-time administrative job wasn't nearly enough to cover their monthly bills, and the financial pressure started mounting quickly. I'll never forget the night Mom called me, completely breaking down in tears. "We might lose the house, Blake," she sobbed into the phone. "The mortgage is 3 months behind, and we don't know what to do." The desperation in her voice was something I'd never heard before, and it shook me to my core. So naturally, I stepped up without hesitation. I paid the back mortgage immediately, set up automatic payments for all their utilities, and started sending them grocery money every month. It was supposed to be a temporary arrangement, just until Dad could get back on his feet and find new employment. At least that's what we all told ourselves at the time. Looking back now, Mom said something shifted in me during that period. I wasn't just helping them financially. I was desperately trying to earn something I didn't even realize I was missing from our family dynamic. Maybe it was approval. Maybe it was genuine connection. Or maybe it was just a heartfelt thank you that actually felt like it meant something. Without fully understanding what was happening, I started tying my self-worth to how much I could give them. And when they eventually stopped acknowledging my contributions, it messed with my head more than I'd ever be willing to admit out loud. But Dad didn't get back on his feet like we'd all hoped. Eventually, he did find work, but it was at half his former salary. Meanwhile, their expenses stayed exactly the same, and somehow I had become their unofficial financial support system. At first, they were genuinely grateful for everything I was doing, like truly appreciative in a way that made me feel valued and needed. But then something fundamental changed in how they viewed my help. The thank yous gradually stopped coming. My financial contributions became expected rather than appreciated, just another part of their monthly budget that they could count on. Even worse, I started noticing that they were talking more and more about how much Victoria was helping the family, which confused me since I was the one actually paying their bills. I brushed it off initially, thinking maybe she was pitching in with other expenses or providing support in ways I wasn't aware of. But then came last Christmas, and everything became crystal clear in the most painful way possible. Uncle Rick stood up at dinner and raised a toast specifically to Victoria. "For keeping this family going through these hard times," he announced proudly, and everyone around the table cheered and applauded. I sat there looking around the room, confused as hell, while Victoria just smiled modestly and said with perfect false humility, "You guys, it's nothing. Family takes care of family, right?" Later that evening, I overheard my cousin Megan talking to her husband in the kitchen. "Vic pays all their bills now," she was saying matter-of-factly. "Blake never offers to help, even though he makes way more money than she does." I was standing there with grocery bags in my hands that I had personally paid for, absolutely stunned by what I was hearing. What the actual hell was going on? I needed answers, and I needed them immediately. So I cornered Victoria that night while she was getting wine from the garage fridge, far enough away from the rest of the family that we could have a private conversation. "Are you telling people you're paying mom and dad's bills?" I asked her directly, not bothering with any polite small talk. She didn't even flinch at the accusation. Instead, she just gave me this look that was half challenge, half warning, like she'd been expecting this confrontation for a while. "They need to believe someone cares, Blake," she said with complete confidence. "I'm the one actually paying, Victoria," I replied, my voice getting tighter with each word. She smiled then, that smug little smile that made me want to launch her into the sun. "But I'm the one actually here," she said with infuriating calm. "You show up what, once a month? Drop off some cash and think that makes you a good son? They need more than your money, Blake. So you're taking credit for my money and making me look bad in the process?" I asked, unable to believe what I was hearing. She sighed like I was being incredibly dense and naive. "They're happier thinking I'm helping," she explained, as if she were talking to a child. "Mom's always worried that you're struggling financially, that they're becoming a burden to you. This way, everyone feels better about the situation." "Everyone except me," I pointed out. That's when she really drove the knife in. She reached over and patted my cheek condescendingly, like I was some kind of confused little boy. "You've always been so hung up on getting recognition, Blake," she said with fake sympathy. "Some of us just help because it's the right thing to do, not because we need a gold star for it." In that moment, I didn't feel angry. I felt completely hollow inside. Like I was a stranger sitting at my own family's table, watching people I loved praise someone else for my sacrifices. I wanted to stand up and scream at everyone that I'd been keeping the lights on, that everything they were praising Victoria for had come directly from my bank account. But some part of me still held back, because I was terrified that if I said it out loud, it would somehow prove I was the selfish, recognition-hungry person they apparently already believed me to be. So I said nothing. I kept paying their bills month after month, and I watched my resentment grow like a cancer inside me. I might have continued indefinitely in this twisted arrangement, letting Victoria take credit for my financial support while I remained the invisible son in the background. But then something happened 4 months before that Christmas dinner that changed everything. I came by my parents' house unannounced on a Thursday afternoon to drop off a new router, because their internet had been spotty and Dad kept blaming the Wi-Fi for every technological problem he encountered. Mom wasn't home from work yet, but Dad and Victoria were in the kitchen having what sounded like a private conversation. I was about to call out and announce my presence when I heard my own name being mentioned. Something in their tone made me freeze and listen instead. "Blake's always been so cold," Victoria was saying with that concerned, disappointed voice she used when discussing my character flaws. "Even as a kid, remember how he never wanted hugs or affection?" "He's just different," Dad replied, but his tone suggested that different wasn't meant as a compliment. "I just don't understand how he can know you guys are struggling like this and not offer to help," Victoria continued, her voice full of fake concern. "That fancy condo he lives in, those expensive trips to Denver for tech conferences. Meanwhile, I'm stretching every dollar just to keep the lights on here." I felt my blood turn to ice in my veins. She was talking about the trips my company paid for, the condo I could afford because I was giving them most of my disposable income, all while she was literally taking credit for keeping their lights on with my money. "You know we appreciate everything you do, Vic," Dad said warmly, and I could hear the genuine gratitude in his voice. "Those bill payments, the groceries. We'd be completely lost without you. Well, someone has to be the responsible one, Victoria sighed dramatically. I actually had to cancel my spa weekend last month to cover the property taxes, but don't tell Mom about that. She'd just feel guilty. I nearly laughed out loud at the absurdity of it all. I had personally paid those property taxes, all $1,200 of them, transferred directly to the county treasurer's office just last month. But here was Victoria, taking credit for my payment while painting herself as the martyr who had to sacrifice her leisure time for the family. Then Dad said something that absolutely stole my breath away. Your mother and I raised one child with a heart, at least, he said with casual cruelty that cut deeper than any intentional insult could have. Blake's always been focused on himself, he continued, and the disappointment in his voice was unmistakable. Hey, it's not your fault, Victoria said, in that soothing voice she used when she wanted to appear wise and compassionate. Some people are just born with empathy, and others aren't. You can't change someone's fundamental nature. I backed away from the door silently, my hands shaking with a mixture of rage and disbelief. I went out the front door as quietly as possible, closed it loudly, and then called out, "Hello!" as if I had just arrived for my visit. Victoria appeared from the kitchen almost immediately, her face transforming from scheming conspirator to sunny, welcoming sister in the span of seconds. "Blake, what a surprise!" she said with perfectly fake enthusiasm. I mumbled something about bringing the router, stayed for exactly 20 minutes making awkward small talk, and then left as quickly as I could without seeming rude. In my car afterward, I sat there shaking, not from sadness, but from a cold, clear rage I had never experienced before in my life. That night, I did something I should have done months earlier. I sat down at my computer and created a detailed spreadsheet of every single dollar I had given my parents over the past 3 years. The numbers were staggering when I actually added them all up. Mortgage assistance, $4,800. Utilities, $2,600. Groceries, $1,500. Car insurance, $900. Property taxes, $1,200. Emergency cash for various crises, $600. The grand total was $11,600. $11,600 freaking dollars of my hard-earned money, and I hadn't received a single genuine acknowledgement or thank you. Instead, Victoria had been systematically taking credit for every penny while painting me as the heartless son who didn't care enough about his struggling parents to offer any help. I started paying much closer attention to Victoria's behavior after that revelation. I began noticing how she would make a dramatic show of checking her bank account balance and sighing heavily whenever bills were mentioned around family members. I saw how she would post these cryptic, martyr-like captions on her Instagram stories. Family first always, no matter the personal sacrifice. And some of us understand what loyalty really means. The final straw came when I discovered a group text message thread that I wasn't included in. Someone had accidentally sent me a screenshot, and there was Victoria writing to our extended family. Water heater replacement handled. Don't worry about it. I've got Mom and Dad covered. She was taking credit for my goddamn money yet again, but this time she was doing it in writing. The more I investigated, the clearer it became that this wasn't just Victoria taking casual credit for my contributions. This was a systematic, calculated campaign to establish herself as the family savior while simultaneously casting me as the selfish villain who couldn't be bothered to help his own parents. She wasn't just stealing my credit. She was actively stealing my place in the family dynamic, and I had been letting her do it for 3 entire years. Until Christmas. That's when everything finally came to a head in the most spectacular way possible. It's Christmas Day, and everyone's supposed to be happy, right? Family gatherings, turkey dinner, all that wholesome holiday spirit. I had driven 5 hours to my parents' place, fighting traffic the entire way. I'd even brought a homemade apple pie that I'd actually put effort into making, because apparently I'm an idiot who still tries to win approval from people who've already shown me exactly what they think of me. I even wore that burgundy button-up shirt my mom always says makes me look professional, which is her polite way of saying I clean up okay when I actually make an effort. I knocked on the door, expecting the usual lukewarm welcome I'd grown accustomed to over the years. But when Mom answered, she only cracked the door open about 6 inches, like I was some door-to-door salesman trying to run a scam on her. "Blake, you can't come in today," she whispered through the narrow opening. Not "Merry Christmas" or "Hey, good to see you." Just straight-up rejection on Christmas morning. I blinked hard, thinking maybe I had misheard her. "What? You're kidding, right?" Mom glanced nervously behind her shoulder, then stepped out onto the porch and pulled the door almost completely shut behind her. "It's better if you didn't join us today," she said quietly. "Things are a bit tense right now." "I drove 5 hours to be here," I said, my voice still level but my head starting to pound with disbelief. I know, she said, still keeping her voice down like she was afraid someone inside might overhear us. "But Victoria said she wouldn't come if you were here. She's been under so much pressure lately with everything she's doing for the family." Victoria, my sister, the golden child. Of course it was her behind this. From inside the house, I could hear the sound of glasses clinking and family members laughing together. My Uncle Rick's booming voice carried through the walls. What would we do without Victoria keeping this family afloat? Then I heard my sister's voice, deliberately loud enough to carry to the front porch where she knew I was standing. "I just believe families should support each other. Some people understand that better than others." I stood there on my parents' front porch, hands full of gifts that these people clearly didn't deserve, feeling something fundamental shift inside me. Not rage, not yet. Just the first small crack in a dam that had been holding back a flood of resentment for years. I nodded slowly at my mother. "I see." It wasn't just betrayal I was feeling in that moment. It was clarity. The kind of brutal clarity that burns through years of denial and self-deception. I had spent my entire adult life trying to be what they needed, waiting patiently for the day when they would finally look at me and see me for who I really was. Instead, they had literally slammed the door in my face to preserve their favorite family illusion. I wasn't just being excluded from Christmas dinner, I was being systematically erased from the family narrative, and they were doing it right to my face. "Maybe next weekend would be better," Mom suggested weakly, still not meeting my eyes. "Victoria's been so stressed about that mortgage payment she covered last month." Something clicked into place in my brain with an almost audible snap. "The mortgage payment she told you she covered?" "Well, yes," Mom said, looking confused by my tone. "And the utilities too. She's been such a blessing since your father's layoff." I pulled out my phone without saying a word and opened my banking app. "Mom, who do you think has actually been paying your bills for the past 3 years?" She looked at me with genuine confusion. "Victoria's been handling everything. She shows us the receipts every month." "Those are my receipts that I send her when she asks for confirmation," I said, my voice deadly calm. "I've been paying your mortgage, your utilities, your internet, everything. Over $8,500 in the last year alone." Mom's face went completely blank with confusion and shock. "But Victoria said—" She started to protest weakly. I hit a button on my banking app. "Well, I just turned off all the utilities," I announced. "They're all in my name, by the way. Let's see how Victoria handles Christmas dinner without electricity." Mom's eyes widened in horror. "What? You can't do that!" From inside the house, I heard my sister's voice rise in sudden panic. "Why did the Wi-Fi just go out? And why did all the lights flicker?" I turned and walked back to my car without another word, ignoring my mom calling after me desperately. As I was backing out of the driveway, I saw Victoria burst through the front door, her face twisted with a mixture of rage and pure panic. She was holding her phone up like some kind of weapon, frantically trying to figure out what had just happened to their power. "Blake, what did you do?" She screamed across the yard, loud enough for the neighbors to hear. I rolled down my window and looked directly at her. "I gave you exactly what you wanted," I called back calmly. "Christmas dinner without me. Enjoy explaining to everyone how you've been supporting the family now that the power's out." As I drove away, I caught Victoria's expression in my rearview mirror. It was pure terror. Because she knew that the elaborate house of cards she had built over the past 3 years was about to come crashing down around her, and there wasn't a damn thing she could do to stop it. The first domino had finally fallen. After I drove away from that disaster of a Christmas dinner, my phone absolutely exploded with notifications. Mom called 7 times in the first hour, Dad called 5 times, and Victoria blew up my phone with increasingly panicked text messages. "Turn it back on WTF is wrong with you," was her first message. "Mom is crying the food is going to spoil," came the second. "You're ruining everything," was the third. I silenced my phone completely and drove to a state park nearby. I found a quiet spot overlooking a lake, and for the first time in years, I felt something that resembled actual peace. It was like I had finally put down a weight I didn't even realize I'd been carrying around for my entire adult life. When I finally checked my phone again several hours later, I had 38 missed calls and 62 text messages from various family members. One voicemail from Dad particularly stood out. "Blake, this childish stunt needs to end right now. Turn the utilities back on and we can discuss your issues later like adults. My issues, right? Of course this was somehow my fault. I texted back exactly 2 words, ask Victoria. Then I turned my phone off completely and drove home to my apartment. I knew exactly what was coming next, and I needed to prepare myself mentally for the shitstorm that was about to unfold. Sure enough, around 9 p.m., there was frantic knocking at my apartment door. The entire family had arrived en masse. Mom looking absolutely devastated, Dad grim and angry, and Victoria alternating between fake tears and genuine panic. I opened the door and leaned casually against the frame. "Can I help you folks?" Victoria immediately tried to push past me into the apartment. "Fix it right now," she demanded. I blocked her path with my arm. "Fix what exactly? I thought you were the one paying all the bills." Her face went from flushed red to pale white in an instant. Mom and Dad exchanged confused looks between themselves. "What is he talking about, Victoria?" Mom asked, her voice small and uncertain. Victoria recovered quickly, just like she always did. "He's making things up to cause drama," she said with forced confidence. "He's jealous that I've been helping while he's been completely absent from this family." I laughed. Not a happy laugh, but the kind that makes people genuinely uncomfortable. "One chance," I said to Victoria directly. "Tell them the truth, or I will." "I don't know what you're talking about," she said, but her voice was already starting to waver. I pulled out my phone and opened my banking app, then turned the screen toward my parents. "See these payments? Every single month for 3 years. Mortgage company, electric company, water company, internet provider, property taxes, all coming directly from my account." They leaned in closer, their faces full of confusion and growing realization. "This doesn't make sense," Dad said slowly. "Victoria told us she was covering all of those expenses." Victoria was standing back now, arms crossed defensively like a cornered animal. "I have my own system for handling things," she said weakly. "Every single bill," I cut her off. "Every dollar, while you told them I didn't care enough to help. While you posted on social media about your sacrifices for this family." Mom turned to Victoria, and I watched her expression change from confusion to dawning horror. "Victoria, have you been lying to us about this?" Victoria's eyes darted around frantically, like she was looking for some kind of escape route from the situation. "It's complicated," she said defensively. "I've been helping in other ways that Blake doesn't understand." "Like what?" I asked pointedly. "Your inspirational Instagram posts? Your emotional support? Don't you think actual money might be slightly more helpful?" "Don't you dare talk to your sister that way," Dad started, but his voice lacked its usual conviction. "Unbelievable," I said, shaking my head in amazement. "You find out she's been lying to you about thousands of dollars, and you're still automatically defending her." "We don't know that she's actually—" Dad began weakly. "Call the utility companies," I challenged him. "Ask them whose name the accounts are in. Ask them who's been making the payments for the past 3 years." Victoria's carefully constructed facade finally began to crumble, and right on cue, the tears started flowing. It was her ultimate trump card, the manipulation tactic that had worked flawlessly since we were kids. "I was trying to help," she sobbed dramatically. "Blake doesn't need the recognition like I do. He doesn't care about family the way I do. I was protecting him from having to deal with all the emotional stuff." "Protecting me?" I repeated incredulously. "By taking credit for my money and making everyone in this family think I don't support you guys? You don't understand the situation," she cried, her voice breaking with perfectly timed emotion. "They needed to believe someone close to them was helping. You're never actually here, Blake. You just throw money at problems from a distance and think that makes you a good son." And there it was, the real reason behind everything. According to Victoria's twisted logic, I wasn't physically present enough to deserve credit for my financial contributions. So she had simply decided that I didn't deserve to be acknowledged at all. My mother sat down heavily on my couch, looking like someone had just told her everything she believed about reality was wrong. "I don't understand any of this, Victoria," she said quietly. "You specifically told us you were paying the utilities. You showed me receipts. Screenshots," I corrected her. "Screenshots of my payments that she asked me to send her as confirmation." Dad was looking back and forth between Victoria and me, and I could literally see his worldview crumbling in real time. "But all those times you said you couldn't go on trips with your friends because you were paying our bills." Victoria just cried harder because she knew she was caught, and her usual tricks weren't working anymore. "She's been playing all of you," I said quietly. "Using my money to make herself look like the hero, while making sure everyone sees me as the villain who doesn't care about his own family." "That's not true!" Victoria shouted through her tears. I've been helping in ways Blake doesn't understand. Emotional support is just as important as money. I laughed again, that same uncomfortable laugh. Emotional support doesn't keep the lights on, Vic. We need to calm down here, Dad said, automatically defaulting to his usual role of protecting Victoria from facing any real consequences. There's clearly been some kind of misunderstanding. No misunderstanding, I interrupted firmly. Just a lie. A 3-year-long lie that turned my entire family against me while Victoria basked in praise for my sacrifices. The room went completely silent except for Victoria's theatrical sniffling. So here's what happens now, I continued, feeling strangely calm despite the chaos around me. I'm done paying your bills, all of them. The utilities stay off until you set up accounts in your own names. Victoria can either tell the entire extended family exactly what she's been doing, or you can keep believing her lies and manipulation. But either way, my wallet is permanently closed. You can't just cut us off like that, Mom gasped. I'm not a bank, I replied. I'm your son, the one you never see, remember? The cold, distant one who doesn't care about family, according to Victoria's version of events. Victoria suddenly shifted tactics completely, her face hardening as she realized her tears weren't working. You're only doing this because you've always been jealous of me, she said with venom in her voice. Always. Mom and Dad loved me more, and you've never been able to handle it. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. You're absolutely right, I said calmly. They always did love you more. But I'm not here to beg for scraps of affection anymore. I'm here to shut off the supply line that you've been living off of. You built your entire image on my back, Victoria. Let's see how long it holds up when I stop carrying it. I opened my apartment door wide. We're done here. Go explain to your Christmas guests why the toilets won't flush. As they filed out of my apartment, Victoria paused in the doorway and hissed something low enough that our parents couldn't hear. You'll regret this. No one's going to believe you over me. I smiled at her. As a great man once said, I don't need you to believe me. I just need them to. I closed the door on her shocked face, and for the first time in years, I felt like I could actually breathe. The aftermath was exactly the chaos I had expected it would be. Victoria went completely nuclear, launching a full-scale public relations campaign within our extended family. But she was smart about it. She couldn't specifically address my accusations because that would expose her lies. So instead, she painted herself as the victim of my supposed jealous breakdown. Her Instagram stories became a masterclass in vague manipulation posting. Having to stay strong when people try to tear you down for no reason, she wrote alongside a picture of herself looking pensively out a window. Some people can't handle when others succeed through hard work and sacrifice. She also sent a group text to our entire extended family that was perfectly calculated. If Blake reaches out to any of you with bizarre accusations, please know he's going through something really difficult right now. We're all very concerned about his mental state. My cousin Megan immediately texted me. Whatever you did to Victoria, you need to apologize. She's absolutely devastated and won't stop crying. I replied with a screenshot of my most recent mortgage payment to my parents' account, along with the message. Ask Victoria, who's really been paying the bills for the past 3 years. The extended family was confused at first. Most of them backed Victoria initially because she had spent years carefully cultivating her image as the devoted, self-sacrificing daughter. But cracks were starting to show in her perfect narrative. My Aunt Linda called me directly a few days later. Blake, I'm confused about something, she said. Victoria's been telling everyone for months that she's been financially supporting your parents, but your mom just called and asked me for $900 to get the utilities turned back on. I told her everything, not with anger or emotion, just cold, hard facts. Dates, dollar amounts, screenshots of payments. There was a long pause on the line when I finished. You know, at Easter last year, Victoria made this big show of giving your parents an envelope, Linda said slowly. She told everyone it was their mortgage payment and made us all clap for her generosity. Check the date on that, I suggested. I bet it was within 3 days of when I made the actual payment. Jesus Christ, Linda muttered. Does your mother know all of this? She does now. Linda must have told other family members because slowly people started reaching out to me. Not everyone believed me immediately. Victoria's perfectly crafted narrative was still powerful, but they were asking questions, and that was enough. Meanwhile, my parents were facing the harsh reality of their situation. They had to set up utility accounts in their own names for the first time in 3 years. They had to pay security deposits because their credit wasn't great. Most importantly, they had to actually look at how much these bills cost without the buffer of my silent contributions supporting them. It's amazing how quickly people can get motivated when their safety net disappears. Dad found a better-paying job within 3 weeks of the utilities being shut off. Mom started doing bookkeeping work for a local business to bring in extra income. They were adjusting to their new reality, and honestly, they seemed more capable than I had given them credit for. The truth was spreading through our family like wildfire. Uncle Rick, who had made that toast to Victoria at Christmas, left me a gruff voicemail. Your father told me what really happened. What she did wasn't right, none of it. My Aunt Patricia, who had always been firmly on Team Victoria, sent me a text. I owe you a sincere apology. I believed what Victoria told us about the situation. We all did. And Victoria? Victoria was imploding spectacularly. She couldn't afford to actually pay what she had been claiming to pay all along. Her carefully constructed image as the family savior was crumbling piece by piece, and she wasn't handling it well at all. She showed up at my apartment one night, clearly drunk, pounding on my door at 2 a.m. You ruined everything, she slurred when I opened the door. They all hate me now. Are you happy? No one hates you, Vic, I said, feeling genuinely tired. They're just finally seeing you clearly for who you really are. She tried to push past me into the apartment, but I blocked her path. You need to go home. Part of me still wanted to believe she was capable of change, that there was some version of my sister that could understand what she had done and feel genuine remorse. But another part of me, the part that had been ignored and minimized since childhood, knew better. Some people aren't sorry they hurt you. They're just sorry you finally stood up for yourself. Home, she laughed bitterly. Mom and Dad are barely speaking to me. I'm staying with Melissa now. They believe you over me after everything I've done for them. What have you actually done for them, Victoria? I asked. Besides take credit for my money? Her face contorted with rage. I was there, she shouted. I listened to Dad cry about losing his job. I helped Mom apply for government benefits. I was physically present while you were just throwing money at the problem from a distance. You know what? I said. You're right. You were there, and that does matter. But it doesn't give you the right to lie about everything else. When did you become so cold? She asked, her voice breaking. I'm not cold, I replied calmly. I'm just done being used. I called her an Uber and sent her home. After she left, I sat on my couch for a long time, feeling a strange mixture of vindication and sadness. The family I had known was gone, but maybe that wasn't entirely a bad thing. About a month after Christmas, Dad called me. His voice was completely different, humbled in a way I had never heard before. We had no idea you were paying so much, he said quietly. Victoria told us she was handling everything. She had explanations for every question we asked. I'm sure she did, I replied. We should have asked more questions, he admitted. We should have seen things more clearly. It wasn't quite a full apology, but coming from my father, it was absolutely seismic. He had never admitted fault about anything related to Victoria before. Is Victoria still staying with you guys? I asked. Dad's sigh was heavy with exhaustion. She moved in with her friend after everything came out. She says we betrayed her by believing you over her. Of course she did. Even when caught red-handed, Victoria was still the victim in her own narrative. Are you and Mom managing okay financially? I found myself asking, hating that I still cared about their well-being. We're getting by, Dad said. My new job helps, and your mother's working more hours. It's tight, but we're managing. I felt a twinge of guilt for cutting them off, then immediately reminded myself that this was how it should have been all along. They were adults, and this was their responsibility to handle. Good, I said. That's really good to hear. Before hanging up, Dad said something that stopped me cold. You know, your mother found some papers in Victoria's old room when she was cleaning it out. Bank statements of yours, credit card bills. It looks like she's been accessing your personal financial information for quite some time. I went completely still. What kind of information? Account numbers, passwords maybe. I don't know all the details, but your mother's pretty upset about it. After hanging up, I immediately called my bank and credit card companies. Sure enough, there had been multiple attempts to access my accounts over the past year. Attempts I had attributed to random phishing attacks or identity theft scams. But they all came from IP addresses that I now recognized as Victoria's apartment building. She hadn't just been stealing my credit for paying the bills. She had been actively trying to steal my actual money, so I filed fraud reports with every financial institution. I changed all my passwords and security questions. I froze my credit reports. And I started the process of pressing criminal charges against my own sister. Not because I wanted revenge, but because some lines simply can't be crossed without serious consequences. As someone once said, it's not about the money, it's about sending a message. What started as a simple fraud investigation quickly turned into something much bigger. The detective assigned to my case asked to meet me at a coffee shop near my apartment. She slid a manila folder across the table with a grim expression. "I think you need to see this," she said. Inside were bank statements, credit applications, and loan documents, all with my personal information, but none that I had ever authorized or even seen before. Victoria had been very, very busy. "How bad is it?" I asked, dreading the answer. "She attempted to open 4 different credit cards in your name," the detective explained. "She was declined for 3 of them, but managed to get approved for one with a $6,000 credit limit. She maxed it out within a week." I felt physically sick. I had no idea any of this was happening. "That's not all," she continued. "We found similar patterns of fraud involving your grandmother's social security information, your cousin Megan's wedding fund, and what appears to be charity money from her yoga studio." "Jesus Christ," I muttered under my breath. "Your sister has been very resourceful," the detective said, her tone professionally neutral, but her eyes conveying exactly what she really thought about Victoria's actions. "The district attorney wants to meet with you about pressing formal charges." I nodded slowly. "I'll do whatever's necessary." As I was leaving the meeting, the detective said something that stuck with me. "In my experience, Mr. Reynolds, people like your sister don't change. They just find new victims." The next few weeks were a blur of police statements, interviews, and legal meetings. My parents were absolutely devastated when they learned the full extent of Victoria's criminal activities. Mom called me one night, sobbing into the phone. "How could she do this? How did we not see any of it happening?" I didn't have an answer that wouldn't hurt her even more. The truth was that they had created this monster by never holding Victoria accountable for anything throughout her entire life. The family fracture deepened significantly as more information came to light. Some relatives, particularly those who had benefited from Victoria's charismatic presence over the years, still defended her actions. "She must have been desperate," they would say. "She didn't mean to hurt anyone. Blake's blowing this whole thing out of proportion." But others, especially those who had been burned by her lies or had seen through her act years ago, rallied around me. My cousin Ben, who I had barely spoken to in years, reached out unexpectedly. "I always knew something was off with her," he told me. "The way she would take credit for everything good that happened and blame others for anything bad. It never sat right with me." The divide was painful but clarifying. It showed me exactly who actually cared about truth versus who just wanted to maintain the comfortable family fiction we had all been living in for decades. 4 months after Christmas, Victoria was formally charged with multiple counts of identity theft, credit card fraud, and embezzlement. She rejected the plea deal her attorney recommended, apparently convinced she could charm her way out of the consequences just like she always had throughout her life. It didn't work this time. The evidence against her was overwhelming. Bank records don't lie, even when sisters do. The prosecution had a rock-solid case, and Victoria's usual manipulation tactics were completely ineffective in a courtroom setting. 7 months after that disastrous Christmas dinner, I found myself sitting in a courtroom watching Victoria plead guilty to identity theft and fraud. It turns out my situation wasn't unique at all. Once investigators started digging deeper into her activities, they discovered she had been borrowing money from several different sources over an extended period. Our grandmother's social security checks had been redirected to Victoria's account. Our cousin's wedding fund had been systematically drained. She had even been skimming money from the charity drive she organized at her yoga studio, taking donations meant for underprivileged children. The look on Victoria's face when the judge denied her attorney's request for probation instead of jail time is something I'll carry with me forever. Not because I enjoyed seeing her suffer, but because it was literally the first time in her entire life that her tears, her excuses, and her "but I'm special" defense didn't work on someone in a position of authority. Reality, as they say, is a harsh teacher. My parents were sitting in the back of the courtroom, looking like they had aged 10 years in the span of a few months. Mom was crying silently, and Dad looked completely defeated. They hadn't wanted to attend the sentencing, but I had insisted they be there. Not to punish them, but because they needed to see the truth with their own eyes and understand the full scope of what Victoria had done. After the sentencing, 20 months in prison, likely to serve 10 with good behavior, I met my parents outside the courthouse. We stood awkwardly in the parking lot, these people who had raised me, who I both loved and resented in equal measure. "We didn't know," Mom said finally, her voice barely audible, "about any of it." I know, I said, and I genuinely meant it. They didn't know because they had trained themselves not to want to know. Victoria had spent a lifetime teaching them to see only what she wanted them to see. Will you ever be able to forgive us? Dad asked, and the vulnerability in his voice nearly broke my heart. I'm working on it, I answered honestly, but it's going to take time. They both nodded, finally understanding that some wounds don't heal with a simple apology, and that trust, once completely broken, isn't easily restored. We went to dinner together, just the three of us, and talked more honestly than we had in years. We discussed Victoria, yes, but we also talked about our family dynamics, about the golden child pedestal they had put her on, and about how they had never really seen me clearly. We took you for granted, Mom admitted, because you never seemed to need us the way Victoria did. Everyone needs to be seen, Mom, I replied. Even the quiet ones, especially the quiet ones. They drove back to their house, their mortgage now refinanced entirely in their own names, their bills set up on automatic payments from their own accounts. I drove back to my apartment, which I had finally made truly mine for the first time. New furniture that I had actually chosen, new artwork on the walls that reflected my personal taste, a living space that represented who I was rather than just being a place to crash between family crises. I had saved over $11,600 by not paying their bills anymore. Some of that money I had used to genuinely improve my quality of life, a better car, actual furniture that matched and looked good together, guitar lessons I had always wanted to take. Some of it was sitting in a savings account, earning interest for my future. My future, not anyone else's. But the biggest change wasn't financial at all. It was mental and emotional. The constant background anxiety was completely gone. That persistent feeling of dread whenever my phone would ring, wondering what crisis or unexpected bill would need my immediate attention, had simply evaporated. For the first time in years, I wasn't walking around with my shoulders tensed, waiting for the next family emergency. The family situation was still messy, of course. Some relatives still looked at me sideways, not fully believing that sweet, thoughtful Victoria could have done everything she was convicted of doing. She was always so caring, so generous with her time, they would say. The mask she had worn for decades was incredibly convincing because she had spent a lifetime perfecting it. My relationship with my parents was complicated now. We talked occasionally, but the easy closeness we had when I was younger was gone, probably forever. There was too much water under the bridge, too many years of being taken for granted and overlooked. They were trying to make amends, but some damage can't be undone with good intentions and awkward apologies. The extended family had essentially taken sides. Most of them had backed Victoria and my parents, clinging to the blood is thicker than water mentality even after all the evidence came out. A few relatives reached out claiming they had always known something was off about Victoria, but I wasn't particularly interested in their retroactive support. Where were they when Victoria was systematically taking credit for my money and turning the family against me? Nowhere to be found. As for Victoria herself, she was serving her time in the state correctional facility. She still had supporters on the outside who believed she had been misunderstood or was just trying to help the family in her own misguided way. Some people will never see the truth even when it's staring them directly in the face, complete with court documents and criminal convictions. But I wasn't responsible for their delusions anymore. That was the most liberating realization of all. Last week, I received a letter from Victoria. I recognized her distinctive handwriting on the envelope immediately, postmarked from the correctional facility where she was serving her sentence. I didn't even bother opening it. I just fed it straight into my paper shredder without a second thought. Whatever manipulation tactic she was trying to pull from behind bars, whatever sob story or attempt at reconciliation she had crafted, I simply wasn't interested in playing that game anymore. I had spent too many years being her unwilling participant in elaborate emotional manipulation schemes. My sister had spent years creating a completely false narrative where she was the hero and I was irrelevant background noise. She had built her pedestal on my invisible financial support, taken credit for my sacrifices, and systematically turned my family against me. But in the end, as someone wise once said, the truth has a way of coming out of the shadows. I was no longer living in anyone's shadow, not Victoria's, not my parents', and not even my own limited view of what I deserved from life. I had finally learned to value myself the way I deserve to be valued. And as I'm writing this update, I'm realizing it's actually been almost a full year since that Christmas when I finally had enough and decided to take a stand. Victoria is serving her time in prison, and I have completely rebuilt my life from the ground up. Sometimes I get random text messages from unknown numbers, my mom trying to reach out through burner phones, or distant relatives attempting to play mediator in a situation they don't fully understand. I just block the numbers and delete the messages without reading them. You had 27 years to treat me like a human being worth respecting. That window of opportunity is permanently closed now. Some people think I'm cold and heartless for cutting off my entire family. That's fine with me. They weren't there to witness what I lived through. They didn't experience years of being gaslit and having their contributions minimized. And honestly, I'm completely done explaining myself or justifying my decisions to anyone. I've got a new job at a tech startup now. Better pay, much better company culture, and colleagues who actually appreciate what I bring to the team. It's amazing how much more productive and creative you can be when you're working with people who see your value instead of taking it for granted. I'm dating someone now too. Her name is Sarah, and she's a graphic designer. She's smart, funny, creative, and doesn't have a single manipulative bone in her body. When I told her about my family situation early in our relationship, she just listened quietly and then said, "Sounds like you made the right choice." Toxic is toxic, regardless of whether they're family or not. No judgment, no pressure to reconcile with people who had hurt me, no lecture about forgiveness being more important than self-respect. Just simple acceptance that sometimes walking away from harmful people is the healthiest option available. I bought a house last month. Nothing fancy or extravagant, but it's entirely mine. Every mortgage payment comes from my account. Every decision about paint colors and landscaping is mine to make. No one can take credit for what I've built, and no one can hold it over my head as leverage. I've started going to therapy too, working through years of being gaslit and emotionally minimized by the people who were supposed to love me unconditionally. I'm learning to trust my own perceptions again, to believe that my feelings and experiences are valid even when other people try to tell me they're not. My therapist says I show classic signs of being the scapegoat child in a dysfunctional family system, the one who gets blamed for everything while the golden child can do no wrong. It's incredibly validating to have a professional name for what I experienced, to know that I'm not crazy or overly sensitive. The family dynamic was genuinely fucked up, and I was the only one seeing it clearly. I still have trust issues, obviously. I still catch myself overanalyzing people's motives sometimes, wondering if they're using me for something, or if their kindness has hidden strings attached. But it's getting better with time and therapy. Sarah's patience helps enormously. She doesn't try to fix me or push me to heal faster than I'm comfortable with. She just lets me process everything at my own pace. Last month, my Aunt Linda tried reaching out through Sarah's Instagram account. She sent her a long, rambling message about how the family misses me, how Victoria's incarceration has been hard on everyone, and how maybe it's time to heal and move forward as a family. Sarah showed me the message and asked what I wanted her to do about it. Block her, I said without any hesitation. My healing doesn't require their participation or approval. That felt incredibly good to say out loud. For the first time in my life, I was putting my own emotional well-being first instead of trying to earn love and approval from people who had already shown me exactly who they were. I sleep better now than I have in years. I don't wake up in cold sweats wondering what crisis awaits me. I don't check my phone with dread, wondering what family emergency will require my immediate attention and financial resources. I don't feel responsible for other people's poor choices and self-created problems. The holidays were weird this year, but in a good way. Sarah and I went to her family's place for Easter dinner. They're just normal people with normal problems and healthy communication patterns. No one was trying to manipulate anyone else. No hidden agendas, no credit stealing, no elaborate schemes. Just a family that actually likes each other and treats each member with basic respect. Her mom asked about my family situation, and I gave her the abbreviated version. We're not in contact anymore. She didn't pry for details or lecture me about forgiveness. She just said, "Sometimes that's for the best," and then moved on to asking about my work. That's what healthy families do. They respect boundaries and don't push for information you're not ready to share. I've been thinking about legally changing my last name, starting completely fresh with a clean slate. Reynolds carries too much baggage now, too many memories of being the forgotten son, the reliable one who could handle anything without acknowledgement or appreciation. I'm thinking Thompson, or maybe Carter. Something clean and simple, something that's entirely mine with no family history attached to it. Victoria will be out in about 8 months if she gets good behavior credits. I wonder sometimes if prison has given her any time for genuine self-reflection, if she's learned anything meaningful about what she did to our family and to me specifically. But then I remember what that detective told me during the investigation. People like your sister don't change. They just find new victims. Victoria will probably get out of prison and immediately start working on her comeback story. How she was wrongly convicted based on circumstantial evidence. How I destroyed our family out of pure jealousy and resentment. How she's the real victim in this entire situation, just like she's always been in her own mind. I won't be there to witness it. I won't be there to defend myself or set the record straight when she starts spinning her web of lies again. And I'm completely okay with that reality. Let her tell whatever story she wants to whoever is still willing to listen. I know the truth about what happened. I have the bank records, the court documents, all the receipts that prove exactly what she did. More importantly, I have my peace of mind, and that's worth more than any family relationship built on lies and manipulation. Sometimes people ask me if I ever regret my decision. Blowing up my family, pressing criminal charges against my own sister, walking away from everyone I grew up with. The answer is absolutely not. Not for a single second. I regret waiting so long to stand up for myself. I regret all those years of silent financial support and invisible sacrifice. I regret believing their narrative about who I was as a person, but I don't regret choosing myself for once in my life. I don't regret demanding the truth, and I sure as hell don't regret cutting off people who saw me as completely disposable. This is my life now, quiet, peaceful, and honest. No drama, no manipulation, no exhausting family politics to navigate. Just me, Sarah, our cat Pixel, who we adopted last month, and a future I'm building entirely on my own terms. For the first time in 27 years, I'm exactly where I want to be, surrounded by people who see me, value me, and treat me like I actually matter as a human being. And Victoria? Victoria can enjoy explaining to her cellmate how she used to be the family golden child, how she had everyone completely fooled for so many years, right up until the moment she didn't. Karma's a bitch, but so is the truth, and the truth always wins in the end. Update 6 months later. Since posting this story, I've received hundreds of messages from people sharing their own experiences with family scapegoating and financial manipulation. It's both heartbreaking and validating to know how common this type of dysfunction really is. A few people have criticized me for abandoning family or being too harsh. To them I say, you weren't there. You didn't live through years of being treated like an ATM with legs while watching someone else get praised for your sacrifices. Some bridges are meant to be burned. Victoria was released early for good behavior last month. Within 2 weeks, I started getting friend requests from fake social media accounts and emails from addresses I didn't recognize. I blocked them all without reading them. Whatever her new strategy is, I'm not interested. My parents sent a Christmas card to my old address, which was forwarded to me. Inside was a handwritten note. We miss you and hope you'll consider reaching out when you're ready. I appreciated that they didn't try to minimize what happened or pressure me for immediate forgiveness. But I'm still not ready, and I may never be. Sarah and I got engaged last month. When people ask about wedding planning and guest lists, I simply tell them it'll be a small ceremony with people who have actually been supportive of our relationship. Some traditions aren't worth preserving. The house is coming along beautifully. I've got a home office where I can work remotely, a garden that's actually starting to look decent, and solar panels that make me feel good about my environmental impact. It's amazing what you can accomplish when you're not constantly hemorrhaging money to ungrateful people. To anyone reading this who recognizes themselves in my story, you're not crazy, you're not selfish for wanting basic recognition, and you don't owe anyone your financial or emotional resources just because you share DNA. Sometimes the family you choose is better than the family you're born into. The best revenge really is living well,